Thank you. Sorry, Megan.
No, excellent. That's great. Is that working? Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, just once again, thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. Like the slide says, I'm here to talk about circular PV and the EV ecosystem. And I think there are some amazing opportunities, to merge those two different things. And I'm going to talk about those briefly, some of the main kind of low-hanging fruit and key opportunities today. What I thought I'd start with, though, is a brief introduction to who Circular PV Alliance is. We're a reasonably new industry, peak body, new kids on the block, and we're all about driving a thriving and sustainable solar energy sector. We realised there was a space in the renewable space, particularly in solar. The industry is very focused on growth, and what we're about is how can we do better as an industry. And part of that conversation is about a responsible renewable energy transition in our achievement of net zero. So we're led by a board of directors, including Laura Jones, who was mentioned earlier, which is great. Just quickly, like I said, we're a not-for-profit industry body and we're an incorporated public entity, which means we have members. We're industry founded, purpose-driven, but commercially minded, which I think is really important to understand that the scope and rate of change that is happening in the industry at the moment. And when we're driving for the circular economy for solar energy, we need to make sure that solutions that we're putting forward have that commercial base so they get traction and are adopted. So we're about growing that commercial ecosystem, and we do that by providing research and evidence that supports circularity for PV. And we're about driving best practices in that sector. And we provide advocacy and a voice for organisations and individuals that align with that purpose. So what have we been doing? So we're small but mighty, and we're growing quite rapidly. We've seen a massive uptick in interest in what we're doing this year since we released an industry report. We've been busy building and demonstrating the evidence base for circular PV pretty much, which involves attending conferences all over in Australia and New Zealand, undertaking research projects with universities, lots of radio interviews, writing reports, working with universities, testing panels, participating in PV stewardship working groups and government initiatives to actually really tease out what are the opportunities for a circular economy for solar PV. We've been winning and nominated for awards, which is really rewarding to see. And as you'll see from my presentation, although it's brief, you'll see we've got so much more to do. So our two most important projects to date have been around getting some real practical hands-on experience in what it is to be in the solar energy industry and handling PVs, and also in that technical space in research and ideas development. So we partnered with PV Lab a couple of years ago and actually got a bunch of solar panels and ran them through a testing process just to even see if the idea of being able to reuse PV panels as part of a circular economy was something that could actually be done. So we did a 4-stage process, which was a visual inspection, a wet leakage test, which basically is a safety test to make sure you're not going to get electrocuted by the used panel, an SDC power output, so how many watts is it generating when it's in full capacity, and electroluminescence, which is like essentially a photograph to look for micro cracks and any other weakness points. And we had some really compelling results. So the panels were about 12 years old on average, and they were all producing at least 96% of their original nameplate output, which is a fantastic result. Micro cracking wasn't an issue, and they were all safe, which is really important for this conversation. So we had proof of the concept that PV panels actually can be reused. But then what are we going to do with them? So we partnered with the University of Queensland to actually do a research project into the market for used PV panels and what the different kind of end-of-life process can look for that. Some of the key things we've found from that research project were that what are the main drivers for used PVs? Like, where are they going to be coming from? So at the end of 2030, we've got an end of the RECs, which is the nice rebate scheme that we've all enjoyed, which has made solar really, really affordable in Australia, but that's coming to an end. We've got a massive volume of used PV panels. Like, we had the highest uptake of rooftop solar per capita in the world. There are literally over 100 million panels installed in Australia. Part of our net zero targets is going to see at least 2 to 4 billion new panels installed. So we're talking about massive volumes, but massive opportunity as well. Social license is driving reuse of used PV panels as well. So consumers are demanding that there's greater transparency in the supply chain. They want to know that this product that they're buying, although it's solving a environmental issue by creating clean energy here, you know, what's happened in its actual manufacturing process. And then importantly, what happens at the end of it? Is it just going to the tip? Is it getting thrown out? Which unfortunately is what we've seen for the majority of solar panels to date in Australia. In the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in stockpiling of panels because people are starting to see that it's not actually a waste product, it can be an asset. And this kind of leads into some of the potential uses that we've got for these panels. But the other thing that's going to drive the market for used PV panels is increasing technology and the electrification of our network that we're seeing as well. So now we know why the panels are coming about. What are we going to do with them that creates that really transparent, ethical ecosystem at the end? We see, and our research has told us that the bulk of the likely uses in Australia, at least for used PV panels, is going to be commercial in nature. At the moment, we have a lot of rooftop solar, but because our solar is so cheap, there's a preference to actually have brand new solar panels on our roof. We feel more comfortable with that. So for the majority of solar panels at the moment that are coming off roofs, we feel they're most likely going to end up in a commercial application. And a lot of those commercial applications can go in a regional area, so where there are no space restrictions. So in smaller areas where you've got a smaller roof or less space to actually have a larger array with maybe a lower wattage output panel, you don't have those kind of space restrictions in regional areas. So commercial regional applications such as green hydrogen and in the agriculture sector, we see a potential opportunities. But what I want to talk quickly about today, I've only got a few more minutes, is the potential for used PV panels as a remote EV charging application, and also high value material resources as well. So this is just an example of a remote EV charging station. I've taken this from the United States. And I know we've got Ellen talking, so I just imagine this could be a jet charge. Regional remote EV charging station. It's really simple, and this is what I find is amazing. Like in all the research we're doing, we feel there needs to be some complicated solution to this, and there's really not. We know the testing processes and standards that panels need to go through. The application for this is so straightforward. We've got infrastructure that are solar shade car parks. We've got you know, EV charging stations that can be installed at remote locations. So just as one really simple idea, used PV panels in the circular economy, helping the rollout of EVs around Australia, a remote EV charging station is a fantastic, really simple opportunity. The second main opportunity I see, thanks Ellen.
Megan, sorry, I just wanted to let you know we probably just have about 2 more minutes here for
sure.
this one.
I've only got a couple more slides, so all good.
Thank you.
The second main opportunity I see for used PV panels in a recycling or circular economy and the overlay with the EV ecosystem is in high value materials processing. So for example, that's a standard PV panel on the left there. We've got aluminium frame, glass, some solar cells, plastic and junction box mostly. And the relative value of the materials in an average solar panel, if we just look at silicon today, normal silicon, like extracted from the solar cell, is about 11% of the value of the solar panel. But Deakin University has just developed a very prototype, admittedly, but it could scale and become commercial, process for developing nanosilicon from silicon extracted from solar panels. And that sells at the moment for $45,000 a kilo. So 6 panels equals 1 kilo of nanosilicon. And nanosilicon is increasingly becoming used as a supplement or to replace lithium anodes in EV batteries. So, you know, once the solar panel is no longer functional and has finished its second life after coming off a roof and being tested, it can actually be then processed to really develop some high value materials that can help with the EV ecosystem and roll out an expansion of that market as it goes along. So just quickly to wrap up, like there are some new research projects that we're doing in conjunction with the ACT government, ANU, and Dow to actually bring those kind of solutions to life. We're looking at refurbishment processes for PV panels so that they can go out in that remote EV charging station or some other second life, doing a deep dive into the reuse market and having a look at some safety and international testing standards that are already in place for reused PV markets around the world. We are actually going to do a demonstration project with the remote EV charging station. So we're taking the tested PV panels from our micropilot project. We're going to partner with an EV charging partner, an optimizer and microinverter provider, a structure provider, and an installation crew, and actually deliver an on-the-ground remote EV charging station so we can actually monitor and see that proof of that demonstration in real life. How I think we can work together to actually, create some really good synergies in this energy transition. I feel there's a really important conversation to have between CPVA, the Electric Vehicle Council, and ABRI, which is the Association for the Battery Recycling Industry. And there's something really beautiful there. I'm not exactly sure what it looks like, but we definitely need to have a conversation about how we can work together to realise some common goals. If you think what we're doing is really worthwhile, I'd encourage your organisation to consider CPVA membership. It helps further our cause and implement real positive industry transformation, including this, circular rollout of EV and circular PV in Australia. It allows us to attend events. We've been invited to speak at the Middle East and North Africa Solar Conference coming up in November. But if you're around at All Energy in October or at Solar and Storage in next year, I think it's in February, please come and say hello. We'd love to speak to you. And that's pretty much it from me today. I think I hand over to Ellen now. Elena?
Yeah, that's right, Megan. Thank you so much. Some really great points there. So thank you for making the time to present to us today. And Ellen, now over to you to talk a little bit about what's happening in the EV charging sector and considerations around end of life there.
Great, thanks, Elena. Thanks, Megan. My presentation is actually not on the solar and charging all-in-one sort of product, but we do have one, and it's in the works right now, and we're actually really excited about it. So Megan, I must come and talk to you about it. So let me just share my screen.
Ellen, while you do that, I'll just remind everyone that Ellen Liang is from JetCharge, a co-founder, also does legal work and some corporate affairs. So a jack of all trades.
All right, can everyone see that?
Perfect. And I'll just let you know when you have a 2-minute warning as well, Ellen.
Okay, great. Thanks, Elena, and thanks for the invite as well. I think that this is a really important topic that not enough attention is being focused on. And so what I kind of wanted to do today was basically, I've called my preso a case study in 3 parts because, and we're only 2 parts through. So it's an unfinished journey for JetCharge, but it's one that we're on the path for. And so I wanted to kind of share a real world example of how we're kind of dealing with the sort of circular economy principles within the EV charging part of the value chain. This is my Megan's very cool sort of animated cloud front page. This is my attempt to be cool as well. So I've just applied a filter to the cover. All right, so just a very brief overview. So I just wanted to take firstly us through our purpose pillars very quickly through what we do, and then we'll dive straight into the case study. So these are our purpose pillars at JetCharge. So JetCharge, for those who don't know, we basically are a company. We provide basically a kind of a full vertical for EV charging infrastructure. So we do everything from the hardware supply to the installation, to the design, to the technology, to the software, and then to the maintenance. And we kind of sort of the reason why kind of Tim and I started this company was for these 3 pillars, which is basically sustainability, industry, and equity. And so a lot of what we do, and a lot of what we're doing around our charger and around the circular economy is basically in support of all three of these things. And in particular, I think the industry, right, in terms of pushing our industry to be more innovative and to think ahead and to push the boundaries of what we can do with our industry. This is a little bit about us, which I think we've already gone through, so I'll dive straight into the case study. So the first part of our case study is basically around our EV charger. And I think when we started developing this, we were doing it, there are plenty of chargers on the market, and we were really doing it to meet local needs. And when we did this, and because of the purpose pillars that we had, we already started to think about, well, how can we make sure that there is sort of longevity to the chargers that we build. And so what we kind of decided very early on was basically to have a modular design, and so that it can be designed so that the components within the charger can be independent of each other, so that if one component breaks, you don't have to change over the entire charger, you can just change over the one component. And the additional side benefit of that is if there are advancements in technology, it means that you can change the component that has advanced rather than the entire charger. And so when we did this, the sort of, for the components, for the relevant components, the cost difference, there is a cost difference, it is more expensive, is, if you, so as probably a starting point, it's about 50% more expensive to do it, you know, instead of a one consolidated component, like one consolidated board, to do it in modular components. But I mean, we've deployed thousands of these already into the field, and they've been in the field for about, 3 years now, and we haven't had to write any charges off. We've been able to basically bring it back into our warehouse, into our workshop, and to be able to change out components and then redeploy them into the field. So that's the benefit that you get, even though you have that upfront cost here. Part two is what we call, so we've got a product called Charging as a Service. It's not a unique product to JetCharge. There are others doing it as well in the market. But as we kind of sort of developed and got more market insight as we sort of grew as a company, there were a lot of cases where basically you could see why there was so much potential for wastage in the sort of the EV charging part of the ecosystem. And they're to do with things like renters. So if you're a renter, you buy a charger, but then you may move house, the next house may not allow you to have a charger, and then what do you do with your charger? You just throw it away. Or if you are a fleet manager and you're managing a fleet for a company, and the company, you're providing EVs for your employees, the employees get their chargers installed in their homes, the employee leaves the company, they hand the car back, what do you do with the charger? Another wastage kind of potential. And so what we tried to do was basically have a model where you can have an alignment of interests between us as a supplier, as a service provider, and then our customer, who then have their own customers. And it's a classic case of planned obsolescence, right? So you just sell something and you actually want them to waste it, because then obviously it leads to increased sales. When you have a charging as a service model, where basically, so I should probably step back and explain the actual model, which is that it's everything wrapped up into a subscription, basically. So you've got the installation of the charger, the charger itself, and all the sort of maintenance and warranty services that come with the charger, all wrapped up into a subscription. The JetCharge owns the charger, and what happens is at the end of the subscription, whenever you want to end the subscription, we basically take it back, take it off the wall, and redeploy it into the field. And so when we were kind of thinking up and designing this product, we wanted to make sure that we had that focus on redeployment. The idea that you don't have to throw away a charger just because circumstances change, that it can just be redeployed in the field and it can just go on and on and on. and wastage is minimized. And then as part of this, we use the ChargeMate charger, which means that they're redeployed into the field if you no longer need it. If it breaks down, we change the component. So again, it gets redeployed. So the cycle continues. And then the last part is basically our future aspirations around chargers and our sort of products. And we are already in the midst of designing sort of version 2 of our charger. And as part of version 2, what we're looking to do is basically improve on so that we can make it, so we can mitigate even more so the wastage around our charger. So things like, for example, interchangeable covers, so that people who want to kind of stay current and have the latest thing can refresh a cover rather than having to refresh the entire charger. The cover itself, we want to make in recycled plastic. So again, it's a repurposing of waste materials. And we also are looking into basically closer supply collaboration around materials. And I should say that for our existing chargers, even though we haven't had to write anything off, we do supply third-party chargers, which we do need to sometimes throw away. And for those, we basically partner with a e-waste recycling provider called Zolo, who basically take it away, strip it, repurpose the components, and sort of, yeah, basically repurpose what they can.
Ellen, I just wanted to let you know we're at a 2-minute warning.
Okay, great, thanks. Good thing you are.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I'm done. Thanks, Elena.
Thanks, Ellen. That was a fabulous presentation. And how good is it to see an Australian company walking the talk? So thank you so much for sharing those 3 pillars with us. And we look forward to seeing more of your work out in the market. So thank you, Ellen. And now I'd like to introduce Natalie Thompson, who is Senior Manager for Policy at the EV Council. Natalie, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Alina, and thanks, Megan and Ellen, for setting the scene for a whole bunch of really interesting topics that I haven't had a chance to dive into today, but what I'll be doing is talk about batteries. So for anyone who isn't familiar with me, I'm Senior Manager of Policy here at the Electric Vehicle Council. So that's the peak industry body, so dedicated to promoting sustainable transport through increasing EV adoption in Australia. So a lot of my current focus actually involves, identifying and addressing barriers to EV uptake, as well as exploring EV value chain opportunities for Australia and promoting supply chain sustainability. So through that, coordinating efforts across various jurisdictions and industries, including the EVC membership as well. So just for, I guess, a bit of an overview for anyone who isn't already familiar with the rapid acceleration of EVs globally. So we know that EVs are going to play a really key role in transport decarbonisation. So there's projections that, based on stated policies to date, globally EVs will reach 35% of, all vehicle sales across all segments by 2030, which will amount to, over 240 million vehicles and 10% of the total vehicle fleet across cars, buses and trucks. And that is following peak oil demand in 2025. And so obviously we know that because of that, we're going to see obviously a lot of demand for batteries and vehicles as well. Just a quick sort of overview of where Australia is currently sitting, in case you're wondering. So we are quite a bit behind global averages, but we are obviously trying to do what we can here at the EV Council to help accelerate that change. So I guess back to the topic of what we're going to go through today, this question of how sustainable are EVs really? And so what we do know is that there are a lot of really great environmental advantages of EVs. So we know that they don't produce tailpipe emissions, which obviously provides myriad health benefits in terms of reducing air pollution, but also reducing CO2 emissions as well. In addition, when you consider the entire life cycle, EVs have significantly lower emissions compared to their petrol or diesel counterparts. And in addition, the integration of renewable energy sources like rooftop solar, as Megan's discussed, and other sources of renewable energy across the grid is making the overall fuel life cycle or sort of operational use phase of an EV much more sustainable from an emissions perspective as well. And so we'll see that obviously decrease over time. It's also, though, crucial to acknowledge that the manufacturing and production of batteries, while necessary, is currently quite emissions intensive and is also resource intensive. So as we move towards a cleaner energy future, we're going to need to address the environmental and social impacts of this transition as well to make sure we're obviously better than the past technologies that we have been taking advantage of. I guess what I would caveat there though is that, unlike oil, which is burned up and requires constant replacement for internal combustion engine vehicles, the minerals in batteries can be recovered and can be recycled. So that's what I'll be discussing a little bit today. So in terms of what's actually going to be needed to improve EV battery sustainability, as you can see here, I've kind of put a sample from our upcoming life cycle emissions tool, but this is just an overview of the life cycle emissions of a medium car being driven in Victoria, whether that's a battery electric vehicle or a petrol vehicle. And there's a comparison there of life cycle emissions for a car driven using the grid versus rooftop solar as well. So you can see, the sort of bits in orange is the battery production, which is obviously quite a substantial proportion of EV life cycle emissions, which obviously we would like to see come down. And in addition, obviously, we can see that the manufacturing of batteries from recycled materials have substantially lower footprints. So to improve sustainability for batteries, we're going to need to establish a circular economy around EV batteries. And that means finding ways to provide critical minerals needed for those technologies while reducing the use of raw materials in battery production. So in addition to that, extending the life of batteries is going to be crucial. So we're already witnessing innovations in battery design, whether that's through modular packs and things like that, also the development of different battery management systems, and innovations in battery chemistries, which are all contributing to longer lasting batteries. In addition, we're going to need to focus on decarbonising the mining and manufacturing processes, including the increased use of renewable energy sources in those sectors as well. And so one key aspect is obviously going to still involve scaling up battery recycling. So while recycling itself can be energy intensive, depending on the methods being used, it does significantly reduce the production footprint of batteries. And that obviously means that overall the life cycle emissions of the battery will also reduce as well, in addition to reducing the need for raw materials. I guess just a little bit of an aside, in terms of obviously supplying the EV transition, some of the things that do get floated around are obviously the fact that they're going to run out of minerals. And it's an interesting question, and it's obviously a source of ongoing debate. But I guess one thing that I would caveat here is that it is important to distinguish between mineral reserves, which are obviously continually expanding as we explore what is available, globally, but also the difference between that and the supply of mined minerals needed for battery production. So while we're not in a situation where we'll physically run out of the minerals required for the energy and EV transition, historical underinvestment in supply sources, coupled with the time it takes to develop economically viable mineral reserves, can present bottlenecks in EV battery supply chains. And as demand for certain minerals rises, we often see prices increase due to competition for limited supply. What that actually does mean, though, it can drive innovation and lead to substitution with other minerals. For example, we've seen the increased prevalence of lithium iron phosphate batteries, which don't require nickel or cobalt in their production, or a shift towards alternative supply sources, including recycling. So in terms of obviously what's currently going on with the state of EV battery reuse and recycling, so we do know that there are obviously existing recyclers in the lithium-ion battery space, which are obviously looking to scale up production to meet the demand for their services. Currently, the largest challenge in scaling up EV batteries recycling in particular is the volume of batteries. So EVs are relatively speaking new, and so it will be a while before significant numbers do reach the end of their first life. And that's because there's a lot of potential for refurbishing and reusing EV batteries before recycling them, but even in their first life, they are often repaired or refurbished within the vehicle itself before being obviously repurposed in second life applications. So what I've got here on the screen is just to showcase, obviously you've got the first life up top, which is the sort of green portion where you've got to go from 100% capacity down to about 70 to 80%, which is when the battery is no longer suitable for use in a vehicle. But what that means is that while it's no longer for use in a road, tested vehicle, that there's a lot of different requirements for that. The EV battery itself can outlast the vehicle in the sense that it can be used for quite a long time after that in secondary storage applications and a range of other applications as well in energy storage. So that means that there is a significant sort of long time frame between the production of that battery initially the second life, and then the actual time it takes for the battery to be spent and then requiring recycling. So we're going to see that market evolve as well over coming decades. And so obviously at the moment, we don't project that we're going to see significant volumes globally for those end-of-life batteries for another 10 to 15 years at least. So as of the moment, that means that the primary sources of battery feedstock for recyclers are going to be cells from consumer products like laptops, and scrap from battery plants in manufacturing, which is where we do see the majority of battery recycling today. This is obviously going to change as the global EV fleet grows as well. So meanwhile, there's obviously a lot of really interesting things happening in battery reuse and recycling as well. So I'm going to explore a couple of sort of key case studies. So while these aren't all in Australia, there's a couple that obviously are looking to expand as well. So back in 2020, Tesla obviously started its own in-house recycling in Nevada to process both battery manufacturing scrap as well as end-of-life batteries. And so historically, Tesla did work with primarily third-party battery recyclers to ensure the batteries don't end up in landfill. To date, while they've been operating, they have received a limited volume of batteries from the field, given that the batteries themselves and the vehicles are built to last many years. So most of the batteries that Tesla does recycle are from pre-consumer or production scrap, coming through, different, R&D projects and quality control as well. So while none of the batteries that are being scrapped are going to landfill, they are all being recycled. Obviously, the challenge they still have is obviously the limited volumes of those batteries. But locally, Tesla does have a remanufacturing facility in Adelaide, and they do anticipate obviously opening similar facilities across the country in coming years as the market evolves as well.
Natalie, just giving you that 2-minute warning now.
No worries. Okay, I'll be quick. So just a quick one. So in Australia, there's also a number of other projects underway. So just as an example, to capitalise on the opportunities provided by refurbished EV batteries, Nissan is working with Electrify to deliver a project to provide energy to its casting plant in Dandenong South. So that plant is powered by a solar array and a battery made from old Nissan Leaf packs. And so what's really actually exciting about this is the fact that obviously that operation is obviously dedicated to the manufacturing of aluminium castings, which do supply a range of different battery, electric and hybrid vehicles sold globally. So it's that sort of circularity is really evident there. And just in addition, obviously globally, Redwood is quite a renowned player in the EV battery recycling space. So that's actually a bit of an offshoot from Tesla. But since they've been operating for about a year or so now, they've obviously received substantial funding, but they've also achieved significant material recovery rates as well in their operations as well. So it's obviously really exciting to see that scale up. So I guess just in terms of what's next, looking ahead, a lot of investment and government support is being directed towards battery reuse and recycling globally. In a number of different regions, like China and the EU, there are regulations and incentives being put in place to encourage responsible recycling and support the growth of the industry. In the US, the Inflation Reduction Act is driving local manufacturing and recycling sectors by emphasising sourcing requirements for critical minerals. So what that means for Australia, obviously a key challenge will continue to be low volumes. There are players here working with limited volumes from a range of different lithium-ion batteries and working with OEMs to reuse or recycle batteries at a small scale. But what we do need is obviously national leadership to consider both supporting downstream processing of minerals and recycling, which involve quite similar processes and opportunities for skill transfer, as well as a number of different areas of regulatory harmonisation around the transport of batteries and policies that support the infrastructure that we will need in 10 to 20 years, but we might not need it now, but obviously it's going to continue to be really important. So I guess to sum up, while batteries won't end up in landfills from EVs, there's still a lot more that needs to be done to ensure responsible practices and support a sustainable transition. And I'll finish up there. Thanks, Selena.
Thank you, Natalie. What a cool presentation, and so many important things to consider both around the battery and the EV. So thank you so much for taking the time to pull that together and talk about the important work that the EV Council is doing in that space. So we've heard from our speakers now. I'm just going to share my screen once more, and then we'll begin the Q&A section of our talk today. 1 second, sorry. There we are. How's everyone? Can everyone see that all right? Perfect. So I'll just invite our speakers to come off camera, which I think they have. And I know we have a couple of questions from the audience, but I might just start with one that I had for each of you. And I might start with Natalie, only because Natalie, you just spoke. You noted earlier in your presentation that one of the most carbon intensive aspects of the battery process was the production process. And you anticipated that might come down. Do you have any visibility into why that is the most carbon intensive part of the process and sort of what could be done to reduce the carbon intensity?
Absolutely. And I guess the production process is quite broad. Obviously, it encompasses a whole range of different activities. And so that's the mining and the manufacturing as well. So we're seeing a lot of things around the manufacturing, which is really a bit more easy to decarbonize in some respects. So we are seeing a number of different, OEMs that are, supplying their plants with renewable energy, and obviously to reduce the energy emissions associated with battery production. So that's kind of a bit more straightforward. The challenge is obviously the minerals and the mining sector. So we are seeing obviously globally efforts by mining industries to decarbonize their operations, but obviously it's going to take quite a bit of time due to just the scale of mining globally. So there's obviously a lot of work underway to do that, but I think that's obviously where the benefit lies, and obviously exploring alternative supply sources as well for those minerals.
Thank you. No, that's wonderful. Another question then, I might direct this one to Ellen. Ellen, this comes from the room. For charging as a service, how do you manage charger depreciation or advances with new technology when you redeploy the chargers? Oh, just make sure you're off mute before you talk.
Yeah, so we have built that, I guess, into our model. So we kind of are basing it off, our assumption is basically, because we're using our own chargers, that the useful life of it is around about 10 years, and that's probably conservative. So in terms of how we factor for technological changes, if it is just a technology change in one of the components, we've designed the charger so that it is modular, so that it can take that component out, swap it out. If it is something a little more wholesale, like for example, once vehicle to grid becomes more of a sort of a mass market reality, then it will be basically a matter of business case when we would want to make that change.
It's a tricky one, isn't it, managing the commercial aspects of chargers as well as the environmental ones. And I think that's actually a question I had from Megan, just dovetailing off that. Megan, you presented on the concept of a remote EV charger using recycled or second use PV panels. I wondered if you could speak a little bit too, and I wonder if it was a curiosity for anyone else in the room, but how might you source those panels from a secondhand market, and how would you compare the functionality or the specifications of various panels? Would it come as a whole system, or would you source them from different places? And how do you test the quality and the utility of them at their second life?
Thank you. That's a great question. I guess at the moment, the circular economy for solar panels is very much in its infancy. So working out some of those logistical challenges is a priority and is being done at the moment. What we've seen is that there's been a massive increase in the number of solar panels that are being diverted from landfill and are actually ending up at a facility that is, if they're not actively recycling them or breaking them down at the moment, they're being stockpiled. So we think it's actually quite simple. The testing process needs to be one that can provide a guarantee on safety, and also what the actual output is of the panel. So we know what the wattage output is and that. And those tests are well known and well understood by the industry, and are actually done as part of quality assurance for brand new panels. So it's just about streamlining that testing process for secondhand panels. And that testing process we see can fit quite easily in at one of these facilities that is receiving panels for recycling. They divert some for testing. Ones that are okay and can be reused go out for that second life application. And the other ones just feed straight into the recycling process. The optimizers on the panels will mean we can actually match panels that have slightly varying output capacities. But Ellen and I have been discussing that the challenge will be around making sure we can get panels that are similar in size, and how we actually maybe design those into a frame of some sort for a shade structure. I mean, we don't have to have a shade structure, but one of the things I've heard from about EV charging stations is that it's good because you have to park there for a bit if you can actually be under shade. I think, Natalie, you said this the other day when we met. It's great to have a shade structure to park your car under for a bit while you charge. So there are a lot of solar car park structures that just make sense that that would be provided as part of some kind of remote EV charging station. Does that answer everything, Elena?
I think so. Yeah. Look, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but you've done a really good job, I think, of addressing all of those bits and pieces. So thank you for taking the time.
No worries.
So we've got a couple more questions coming in from the audience. Thank you. We've got one here, I think, look, it could be for anyone, but maybe I might direct it to Natalie in the first instance. The question is, at what point will there be enough material in the industry to not have to mine these anymore? Meaning all of the materials come from repurposed content or recycled content.
It's a really, really great question. And I guess I won't be able to speak for, it depends on obviously the different sort of inputs you're thinking of. But I guess when you look at sort of minerals for batteries in particular, obviously we are quite a long way from that happening. It's just because obviously historically we haven't needed to use a lot of these inputs in the products that we do. But obviously we've had things like, lithium-ion batteries for quite a long time in a range of different applications. But in terms of obviously the volume that is required for the EV transition and the clean energy transition more broadly, we are still going to need to see, I think, over the next couple of decades, quite substantial raw mineral extraction. Obviously, that means that we've got to focus on making sure that there is obviously improved responsibility and sort of environmentally sustainable practices in those industries in particular. But ideally, there's a world, in some time in the future where we will see, a substantial proportion of recycled content in manufacturing. We are seeing globally, obviously, there's different regulations underway, particularly with the EU's recycled content under the Batteries Directive, which will help to really push the sort of volume of recycling and the proportion of content in batteries that is recycled. But obviously, it's going to take some time. Hopefully, that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that is good. It does take time, doesn't it, to get these things set up? But it's so good to be drawing attention to them now and starting to bring them to the fore, I think, in terms of forums like these. So to that end, Ellen, I might ask you. You mentioned that sustainability was one of the key pillars for JetCharge as a company, and obviously you've built that into your design thinking. Can I ask what inspired you to think that way, and how do you see that becoming potentially an increasing priority as we as a society face the risk of climate change?
So the question of why we decided to prioritize that at JetCharge, it was just your classic co-founder conversation at the kitchen table, and we were just sort of deciding what we wanted to do. And at that time, I was basically we kind of decided. So for context, so the co-founders, myself and Tim, as well as Jay. So Tim and I are married. And Jay we kind of roped in about 10 years ago. And we basically, Tim was not going to take a wage when we first started, and so I was sort of like, well, if I'm going to be bankrolling this effectively, I want it to mean something. And so that's kind of where the roots of our kind of prioritizing of things like sustainability came from. In terms of the larger question of climate change and what the role that EVs have to play in it, I think it's sort of been identified basically. I went to a McKinsey event recently, and they, talked about how transport is absolutely one of the sort of lowest hanging fruits for hitting our net zero by 2050 target. And on my slide around the purpose pillars, we sort of talk about sustainability as almost EVs as almost like a sleeping, like a Trojan horse almost for sustainability. Because when consumers make the choice to go EVs, they are not necessarily thinking about the environment. I remember when we started trying to kind of push for EV chargings and fleet transitions in companies, it was actually that, the sustainability angle, a lot of the time did not get them across the line. And I think, but sort of the kind of the push now and the kind of inevitability almost of the EV transition means that we now have this vehicle, pun unintended, by which, now we have this large pool of energy usage, and as the grid becomes more sustainable, that is the vehicle by which we will become sustainable as a society. And it actually doesn't matter from a consumer perspective whether you care about the environment or not. The fact that you buy an EV will allow and be a conduit for that sustainability to occur.
I love that thinking, and it is absolutely one of the most compelling propositions about going electric in your car, that it becomes a conduit to promoting renewable energy and living a true zero emissions lifestyle. And I don't know about you, but just to extend that further, for me as an EV user, it comes into my home. You know, I start to have this mindfulness around my consumption because I'm thinking about it when I'm driving and you know, operating my car just in my daily life. You know, that thinking extends beyond just driving. So that's a really cool feature. I would agree. I'll just acknowledge the audience. We've had quite a few additional questions come through. We won't be able to get to them all today, but we will certainly note them. And thank you for your contributions. I wanted to wrap up with just one final question to the room at large, and feel free, each of you, to take a stab at answering it. The question is, you've each presented challenges around the work that you're doing, and sort of are at this growth phase of where your organization is seeking to be more circular or more sustainable in the way that you do your work from your day to day, but also promote increasing that presence. My question is, what can be done to support you better individually and as an integrated approach, and what can government particularly do to support you to that end? And feel free to maybe go in the order that you presented. So maybe Megan, Ellen, and Natalie.
Okay, thank you. That's a great question. Lots of great questions today. So I think for us, what we are promoting as an organisation is just this constant collaboration, and that's where we've gained the most traction, is when we talk to people that are out there in the industry. We need to keep on collaborating. That was one of the slides I had at the end. There's just this important conversation that I want to pick up now with the Electric Vehicle Council and ABRI and different organisations, and actually start you know, weaving together the different organisations and the roles we all play in actually bringing about this change. So it's collaboration, it's conversations. Us as an organisation, we're a membership-based organisation. So for us to continue to deliver the value and impact that we do deliver, we need to continue to grow our membership base. So if anybody feels inspired to have a conversation about becoming a member, check out our website. What can government do? Government can listen, I think, is a really important thing. And they are showing signs of wanting to listen to the solutions that the industry has. Like I said before, the testing standards are known. A lot of the solutions are out there. It's just talking to industry, working out what the pain points are, and having that collaborative approach to solving the problems. I think we all know what the solutions are. It's just putting the right policy in place, a bunch of push and pull mechanisms. If people want to have a look at our report, we outline exactly what these are. But it's just really that collaborative conversation between industry and government as well.
Thanks, Megan.
For me, I think, and I keep on harping on about our pillars, but so back to the industry pillar, I think it's important to basically put in place the right kind of incentivization for the industry to head in certain directions. And the question of sustainability, it almost, what would be really great is if it were framed more around innovation, because I think that's what it is. It is about sort of changing the way that we do things, which is innovation. And innovation in Australia, I think, is really important. You know, the fact that we want to incentivize that the industry and the innovation and the IP for that innovation, you know, so that we don't have to just, again, mine stuff, ship it out, get it refined, sell it, you know, buy it back at a premium, right? Like, we want the IP to be here. We want the technologies and the innovation that allows us to have sustainable sort of practices and products and, you know, all of that to sit in Australia. So I think that's, if the incentives could be designed to encourage that, that would be great.
And I guess I'll add on to that, and I think it really fits into kind of a lot of the work that we do is the fact that we do really want to capture all the value in the EV value chain. We have so much potential in Australia to really do that, and whether that is you're looking at, obviously, you know, across the energy system itself, but also just for the battery supply chain in particular. And so, you know, a big challenge that Australia does have, we don't have substantial capacity in manufacturing. And that can present a challenge for scaling up recycling, just in the basis that is we know the countries that do well in battery recycling today are the ones that are making the batteries because they've got the existing expertise and skills, they've got the broader capacity as well. So it just makes it really challenging for us as a country, which is why we do need national leadership on this. And so I would like to see the national battery strategy when it does come out to focus a key part in there on the circular economy development and what we can do in Australia. As well as just more broadly getting coordination. But so both, at the federal level, getting government departments talking to one another across, the departments related to mining, but also energy and, climate change as well. There's a whole need. There is obviously a lot of, interjurisdictional working groups as well that do exist, but I think there's still a lot more to be done there. And so making sure that we do have the states also working together with the federal government to really create a, harmonised framework around the regulation, whether that's around the transport of batteries or safety standards or, data analysis as well. That there's so many areas of that. And so I think, the key, barrier that's going to kind of be a challenge for us to address over coming decades is going to be that coordination. So I'd like to see more of that.
So important. Thank you for flagging all those points, Natalie. And thank you so much to our speakers for presenting today. Thank you, Natalie, Ellen, and Megan. You've really contributed a lot to this discussion and brought us together in a way that we haven't been brought together before around the EV ecosystem with incredible data and a case study and suggestions for what we could do to innovate further. I really enjoyed this, and good news to everyone in the room that we've recorded the session, so feel free to share the link once we get it out. We'll send it both to those who are in attendance and those who are on our Women of Electric Vehicles mailing list. So thank you again, and we look forward to joining you next time we convene a webinar. Everyone have a great day and happy World EV Day.